This video is about taming messy data. The video shows a more complex process that turns messy data into something usable. It's often necessary to combine operators to get the desired result, and this video shows this. The operators used are generate ID, filter examples, replace missing value series, join, and pivot. So what we'll look at first is the data. We'll look at that in some detail because that's the area where there should be most interest to try and match the data you have to this example. If we'll look at the data, we'll understand what needs to happen to it and actually why this is quite a hard problem. But then we'll give a view of how we're going to solve it, and that will involve using generate ID, which will create a series, filter examples, which will create two subseries, join, where we'll join things together, replace missing values series. This is the key part. It propagates values forward so you can join the series properly, and then pivot to get the right answer. So let's look at the data first. I'm using a spreadsheet. Here we are. So this is the messy data, and you'd be surprised, well, I don't think you would be very surprised, how often data comes in this format and the person supplying it says, this is fantastic, this is just what you want. But it isn't really, because it's not in an example set layout. You have different rows here, messy data, the same column actually filled in with different text depending on the row it's on. But in this particular case, what I'm trying to get to is I want to get the identifier, and I want to associate the key 1 and key 2 values here, and I want to come up with a table like this on the right here. So identifier 1, key 1 12.2, key 2 112.1. I actually want to get that and those turned into this single row here, and then I want to keep going down here, and you can see here's 2 and here's the values for that. And you notice this data is quite hard because the number of keys here is variable, the order is variable, there's all sorts of messy data in the other places, and it makes it quite a hard problem. Fortunately, we can solve it, and the process that I use is here. So what we'll do is read the Excel spreadsheet in. Basically what we do is we create a series out of it by numbering each row that's read in. Then what we do is we look for the identifiers, that's down this path here. We also look for the key name value pairs. We do some gymnastics and we join the result together. The best thing is to let's look at it. So let's start with the Excel, read that in, and let's look at this first line here, this first process here, which generates an ID on it. So first thing first, let's read the data in. So this is the same as was in the spreadsheet. This is in fact the spreadsheet, and you can see here's my identifier, and here are the key pairs that I want. I'm going to continue one step, and I've added an ID. So this is essentially, think of this as the line number. We're going to use this ID later when we do joining. Going back to the process view. So we've got to this point here where we've generated an ID. Okay. Now what we're going to do is actually we're going to select everything but the ID, which is what this is going to do. We need this for later. And the original data output from that is going to go to this find identifiers operator here, which is actually a filter examples. So let's set a breakpoint on this. So we're going to select attributes here. We're just going to set the single ID. We're going to discard all the rest. Let's set a breakpoint on that. Sure enough. So this is just the ID selection. So this shows you all of the rows in the original data. This is all of the data. We'll need this in a minute. And the other one is just, this is just the simple output with all the raw data in. Okay. Now what we're going to do is filter some examples, and we're going to look for all of the examples where the identifier matches this regular expression. Now this means find at least one digit, then find one or more 0 or more decimal points, and then find 0 or more numbers. In other words, 0.0 would match, so it would just 0, so it would 47.2, and so on. And that, if I set a breakpoint here, we'll see that we will successfully pick out the identifiers. Here they are, 1 to 6. We also have the ID of those, that's the row in the original data. Now what's going to happen is we're going to do a select attributes on the filtered data, and we're just going to keep the ID and the identifier that we've found, and then we're going to join that using our left join to the IDs of all of the data. So let's just go straight to this join here. Let's run the process. So here's all the data. This is all 29 rows. This is just the IDs which have an identifier in. If I set a breakpoint after that now and continue, we'll see the result of that will be all of the rows of data, but with the identifiers filled in the relevant places. So we're sort of getting there. We're tidying the data slowly. Next thing, we'll go back to the filtering output. So if you recollect, the filtering here, that looked for identifiers. That was the top route. The bottom route is the original data, and we're going to do an additional filtering on the original data this time, and we're going to look for any attribute which has the value key 1 or key 2. This is what this regular expression is doing. So what I will do is set a breakpoint after that, run it again. So sure enough, this time key 1 or key 2 have been matched, as you can see here. And we also have the ID, the row number that corresponds to in the original data, and here's the value of interest. So we're getting there slowly. Now, and this is probably the heart of the process, this operator here, this is the replace missing value series operator. Now what you do is you fill in the identifier. In this case this is the identifier of which is between 1 and 6, and what you can do is you can get this operator to fill a missing value in. In this situation, let's just use the previous value. So this is great because it will allow us to propagate forward all of the identifiers where they are missing. To prove it, let's just do a breakpoint before and a breakpoint after. So I'm going to run this. This is before the replace missing values. So sure enough, identifier has been found on row 1, but it's blank, but it applies to row 2. So the fact that it applies to row 2 forward means just by feeding it forward using replace missing values, that will get filled in. Let's just keep going. There it is, sure enough. So ID 1 through 6, rows 1 through 6 of the original data have had applied identifier of 1. Okay. So now we'll do some joining. So let's breakpoint before this join. So I'll run that. So before this join, so this is the original data with the identifiers filled in using the replace missing values. This is just the key value pairs. Run that, and now we actually have the joined data now, where we know the identifier and the key and values for the rows where they are in the original data. Okay, back to the process. The final step is to pivot that up. So we group by the identifier and we index by the name of interest in the original data. Let's do a breakpoint before to see what the input to the pivot is. So sure enough, name of interest is the key, identifier is the thing we're going to group by. So we should now see, as I run that, sure enough, there's the identifier, there's the key, and for each of them. So we compare that with the original input data. We can hopefully convince ourselves, if I can move it around, that sure enough identifier 1, 12.2, 112.1, and so on. So I'll just run this one more time. The key to this, I think, is the replace missing values series operator. So let me just do a breakpoint before and a breakpoint after, and show that before and after.